Everyone. Can you all hear me? For cross-checking, I would take help of. Thank you, Supriya, for introducing me. Uh, Thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity to talk about something. Today, what I'm going to talk is it will be very, is interesting subject where the major risk is taken care of in oil industry. Basically, I have a team who is helping me out for this last 2 weeks from the SP chapter, student chapter, Presidency College, and there Shotovisha, Sayantika, Abir, Bande, and Subhadeep is there. They are doing a great job. We are late by another, we are late by around 6-7 minutes. Sorry for that technical issues we had faced in the morning. Let's start. And we have more than 600 participants today. Few have already joined and few are still waiting in the lobby. I'm sure in due course of time they are going to join us. So relax and let's see. This I have avoided most of the mathematical parts, but I just wanted to give you a test of what actually pressure means and what is the pressure, the concept of types of pressure in down below in Mother Earth, and the most importantly how these accidents happen basically if we don't take care enough of our pressure studies. So, am I audible to everyone? Supriyo, Shatavisha, Shantika, can you hear me? All
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Sound clear, right? So, let's start. This is the thing I'm going to discuss and relax. I have avoided all mathematics, all physics. Just I'm trying to build up something in you that might trigger your interest in handling the mother nature. As everyone are requested to turn off your videos and mute because this will interfere and ultimately this will hamper our concentration and also some people who are really interested. So please help us to help you out. And keep a better thing is to keep a pen and paper. If you have any questions, I will take some of the questions, but I know this is an interesting thing. So the end of the day, you will have a lot of questions in your mind. So keep a pen paper. I will explain everything. I will try to explain and make sure that you understand. If not, we'll take some questions, and if not, with your Google form, you can ask question and send mail, and then I'll try to explain and give you answers in short time. Okay. So before we start, this is our mother nature. Just interrupt me in case Shatavisha and Santika, if you see that the slides are delayed or it has not come, just stop me. Okay. Keep your microphone on. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay. So some dimension and specification of our mother earth is basically a semi-spherical object, we can say. An average diameter is basically around 1200 plus 12,000 plus kilometer with an, and mythologically, if you see, lastly, the mother earth is the only planet it is not named after a god. Rest of the planet in our solar system is named after the god. I don't know the reason, but anyway, so far we have seen the surface conditions and the geographical information. Now, being a geologist, let's see what is there inside the earth. The scariest facts are pressure and temperature. I am not going into details of the other things, but if you see, this is approximately 3.6 million atmospheric pressure. One atmospheric pressure is in the surface of the earth, which is the air pressure. And but if you go to the center, is basically 3.6 million or 36 lakhs atmospheric pressure. And the temperature is 6,000 degrees Celsius. Everything is in a molten condition. So apparently whatever you see in the surface is basically much more hostile when you go down. I'll start with the geothermal gradient. Geothermal gradient, as a student of geology and a normal person, we understand that once we go down or drill below or make a hole inside in coal mines and other mines we have experienced, you will see this is basically our surface temperature is 15 to 20 degrees centigrade in average. In Ecuador, it is little bit more of 25. If you go to the polar region, is almost like 0. So average 15 to 20 degrees centigrade. But once we go down below, it raises the temperature. How? It is sometimes is 1.8 degrees centigrade per 100 meter, or it is a maximum of 4.2 degree per 100 meter, depending upon the tectonic settings. Tectonic settings might be a new layers are overlapping each other, crustal layers. So definitely the temperature increment in these 4 areas will be different, and that's how it looks like that. If you see the top corner, there is a green line which is called solidus. So right side of the solidus is all liquid, left side of the solidus is all solid, and the geothermal gradient is in a brown color. So if you see tectonic set in normal situation where the solidus is much right side and much below actually in the earth, the geothermal does not touch the solidus. So geothermal gradient is increasing, but it does not touch. So you will not have some liquid phase in the below a normal situation, which is represented at A. Then if you come to mid-oceanic ridge, if you see the solidus is more or less same place, but suddenly the mantle, as the mantle has come up, your temperature suddenly rises, and then it drops down because the is almost the this is the mantle temperature. So if you see the cursor wherever in the north, I mean the upper part of this graph, there is a part where you have a overlap or crossover between your solidus and your temperature gradient. So in this particular area, which is in the mid-oceanic ridge, you will have the molten phase. So this is the way we understand, or we can calculate how far is the mantle will be, how much is the plume, or how much magma it can come out. These are the all different studies you will come to know in later phase of your life when you go on pursuing geology. Then if you come to see, if you see the geothermal gradient is little bit steeper. One, and then if my water is full of saturated salt or fluid or something else that increases my density of water, that gradient will be not gradient, this pressure will increase accordingly. So if you see, the left one is freshwater hydrostatic pressure and the right one is salt saturated hydrostatic pressure. So the addition of the dissolved salt is increasing the density, so is changing the rho, and that changes the, because height is constant at particular depth and G is also constant. So only because of the density is changes. Next, now I will go little bit of more detail about that. If you see, I have plotted few of these density parameters and the pressure parameters. The same, the depth is increasing towards down, and in x-axis we have the pressure. Now, if you see fresh water in the bottommost one, which is leftmost one, which is represented in the green color. Green color is under pressure regime. I will come to later, or probably that is not today's thing. So under pressure happens when you have a reservoir which is filled up with water or oil, whatever. When you take out water or oil from below, then you drop the pressure below hydrostatic. So green zone is like that one. And then if you see the 0.433 psi per feet, this is basically your hydrostatic pressure of the fresh water. Then depending upon the density of the water, if you see, it is going towards right side. So the range up to almost 4.47 psi feet is up to normal pressure, and then when it is goes more, then is called abnormal pressure, which is 0.5 to 0.7 psi, and then we have hard or supranormal pressure, which is more than 0.78 psi per feet. So this is the way we actually divide different pressure because only of the hydrostatic thing. So, and that is because only of the density of the water or the formation or the fluid, whatever that changes. Okay. Now, we will see this thing is called overburden pressure. So, what is overburden? Suppose you are carrying a brick. You can feel that okay, I am comfortable with, and then you put someone put one more brick. So whatever you are carrying and above you against gravity, all the weight of the material, if you want to calculate, that is called overburden pressure. The name itself explains everything, that something is pressing down as a weight. That is called overburden pressure. The complex, this is the simplest formula we have. Let's see, if I have something Q. Q is basically the building and these other road constructions, all those things, plants, trees, everything. And then I have three layers, layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 in my subsurface. And at the bottom of D3 layer, if I want to calculate, this is the complex calculation, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to go there and I don't like to discuss here. Later, forget everything. So I removed everything. What you feel is basically in simplest form is depth multiplied by unit weight of soil. If I can average out 1 meter of soil and the weight of the 1 meter of soil multiply by the meter, and you will see the overburden pressure. Okay. Then I am going to punch both. Now we have seen hydrostatic, and now we understood what is overburden. If you plot together, you will see the hydrostatic is basically only connected pores, and that falls in this kind of representation compared to, these are comparative thing compared to the overburden. So as the rock density is much more, almost 2.6 is the density of the sand, and then limestone is 2.71 gram per cc, but water density is 1. So if you put a column of water, that will follow the hydrostatic pressure increment, and if you put a column of average rock, like a mixture of sediments, then it will more or less it will be overburden, that will follow the overburden curve. So if you see all my pressure basically, unless depleted means I told you that once you take out the fluid or something oil from the subsurface, you don't go below the hydrostatic. And once you have calculated everything, the weight of the rock above that particular point, that is covered up to the overburden. So all our pressure regime will be within this zone. Now I have, so far we were talking about theory. Now we will be seeing that what happens actually in the nature. If you see, this is a shoreline, and we can see the MSL sea level here, and the sea floor is going down below towards the open sea, and the left side from that structure is basically our land. But interestingly, we all know that this line is groundwater, and groundwater is not horizontal always. Generally, towards the continent side, the groundwater is above sea level, as there are other calculations like that density and other thing. So this is or I drill a hole from this point. This is my 1 atmosphere line, which is vertically down, that is my axis. And if I drill a well, so immediately when I drill a well in a beach, then after like 1 or 2 feet, you will see water. So I have rock in the beach or sands in the beach, and also I have started getting the water in the beach, which is there in all the pore spaces inside the inside the sediment. So if I want to calculate or measure from that particular point to down below, you will see that the blue line, the hydrostatic pressure will fall in the blue line because all the pores are connected and my water weight is giving me the pressure increment as we go down. Now consider about the lithostatic pressure. The same thing, I will calculate everything, the overburden with fluid as well as the rock. The total weight of the bulk density or the bulk rock will be followed by the lithostatic pressure. Now what happens if I go much more higher side, which is in the upper part hilly area? If I drill a well or start calculating something like same as hydrostatic pressure or lithostatic pressure from this point where this structure is there, then you will see my hydrostatic pressure will start from the ground level, groundwater table, which is from this point. But because this area is full of air, so considering the density of the air is almost negligible, so this will be the way how you should calculate the pressure, hydrostatic pressure and also the lithostatic pressure. So lithostatic pressure will start from the immediately below the surface, but the hydrostatic pressure will start once we touch the water table. Now what will happen if I go to the offshore or the sea? You will see the difference is little bit. What? The first, from the sea level till I go down and touch the sea floor, my lithostatic pressure is zero or overburden is zero because there is no rock. But what is the area filled up with? This is filled up with water, right? So the water pressure will start immediately from the surface of the sea level. So water hydrostatic pressure will start from this line and it will follow. Is it okay? Can I continue?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the hydrostatic will follow this path and immediately from the sea level, you will see that the pressure is increasing, the hydrostatic pressure is increasing once we go down. But what happened with the lithostatic? Lithostatic pressure will start once we touch the sea bottom, because before that I don't have any rock or any sediments to calculate. But interestingly, if you see that I am going to zoom this one. See, don't get confused. This is just to make your moods light. That starting point of pressure increment depends on location of the wellbore. So this picture you should keep in mind in the future when we want to drill anything down below for hydro or oil exploration or any other reason or mines, whatever. That whenever you are doing that, this one should be taken care of. But if you see, I have something interesting here. The red border came, Shatavisha?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, if you zoom it out, you will see the interesting part is the lithostatic pressure is supposed to start from once we touch the sea level. But actually, in that point, my lithostatic pressure is little bit more than what we are supposed to be, because at this particular point the height of the water, though I have no rock, but the height of the water is exerting some pressure on this point. So it does not start from immediately here. It already, this one is the amount of hydrostatic pressure because of the water column is already gained. So lithostatic pressure will start from this point and down below. So I'll go back to the previous slide. Now if you see why there is a difference and represented by dotted line, that where from my lithostatic pressure is increasing. Now if I see, so far I was measuring the pressure and depth. Now what I am going to convert it is basically from measuring the pressure, actual pressure, to the gradient. And you know, any gradient is basically the rate of increment or decrease with the value. Now if you see in our left picture, the same picture what I was telling before is the freshwater hydrostatic pressure, and the other one is the salt saturated hydrostatic pressure. But this, if you see, this is a straight line and this is a measured pressure. But if I go to the right side, you see increasing pressure gradient. So gradient will be constant because this is a straight line and the gradient will be constant. So if I plot that to here, you will see the overpressures, the freshwater hydrostatic is coming following this vertical line, which is the gradient of that freshwater hydrostatic, and the other one is the salt saturated fluid hydrostatic pressure gradient. So when you see this kind of left side, the pressure, increasing pressure, the value, and you see the gradient, you need to understand that the implication and the mathematics behind that. If I see anything is this line is carved, you will see this one will be carved also because this is a derivative of that one. So now we understand what is called pressure gradient. Now we'll come down to something else called fracture gradient. So what is fracture gradient? Suppose we have a tub in our home and then I put a 500 gram weight on it. This looks fine, no problem. So my pressure, which is shown in the green arrow, this is P1. So this 500 gram of weight, which is like a overburden, is exerting pressure on that tub. What will happen? Nothing. This guy is fine, comfortable. Hello? Hello, can someone please mute please?
Divada, your mic is off. Still muted.
Muted my mic.
Yes. Now it's okay.
Someone has muted. Fani, good morning. Okay. So actually that person might be like not liking it at all. Anyway, thank you. So now if I see, I come back to that one again. The tub is fine and then healthy. If I increase that one little bit more, I put 1 more kg. So total weight is 1.5 kilo on the same tub. This smart guy is very good, still holding the pressure and still very robust to take that load of overpressure, right? Which is that now the pressure is increased, the weight overburden is increased, the weight is increased on that one. So my pressure gradient, which is represented by blue color, which is in the right hand side, is P2 now. Still, he is okay. Now what will happen? If I put 2 more kilo over there, he said no more. Nothing more I can take is enough. He got a crack. So he developed a fracture. And this is why you will see one of the reasons why we have seen fractures in the rock in nature. Now today in the surface, but once they were down, they were hard. They would not take the load of the overburden pressure. That is the reason there are a lot of fractures on surface today, and we geologists, we go and measure them and do analysis, stress strain of everything. So this is the concept behind that. And if you see my curve in the right side, pressure curve, you will see that the P3 is the pressure where when my fracture is developed and this whole tub is broken. So if I want to think in nature that suppose at 1 kilometer depth or 2 kilometer depth, I have a rock with less integrity or less strength, and the overburden pressure is so much, the rock becomes crumble and get fractured. Okay, gradient. Now, this is the zoom version, and if you see, we can calculate the height of the overburden or the at the depth where we can basically develop fracture. We can do it. This is a natural one, but in drilling process, I will come to that one. You will see sometimes with the pressure of drilling, we can create fracture, which is very dangerous. So if I create a fracture down below, the reservoir will be open up. Sometimes one reservoir is fractured, the other one is fractured. So fluid from one reservoir to another one can go there. The water movement will be there inside below. Nothing will be in the surface, but everything will be done. Then also this is called internal blowout. Something will not come up in the surface, but one formation will start breaking and the fluid will come out and go to the other one. So ultimately, if they can come to a surface, then that will be a disaster, and they will see all the fluid will come out of the surface like a crack, through the crack. Now, from the concept of pore pressure, little bit. So what we have seen so far, I just want to recapitulate because it's the first time you are listening that. One is the hydrostatic pressure, which is the pore pressure, which is the pressure of the water column. Another is the overburden pressure, which is the weight of the overlying surfaces at particular depth. And in between, I have a fracture gradient where the rock is getting fractured. Basically, overburden is a combination of everything. There are two parts. One is fluid and another one is solid part. The fluid is giving you pore pressure and the solid part is giving you effective stress. I will not go to the detail of the effective stress again because it will be a three-dimensional thing. I'll come little bit of that, but I'm not going into that detail. So whole together, it is giving you a rock at particular depth a total or bulk stress. So this stress actually creating the fracture in down below. Now, if I combine all these things like hydrostatic, overburden pressure and fracture gradient, in reality, it comes like this way. So my lower boundary is hydrostatic, my upper boundary is overburden pressure, and in between fracture gradients there, depending upon the rock physics, the rheology of the rock, integrity of the rock, and other factors like cementation, lot of things. So in nature, this is the approximate, which is these are all a straight line, but nature is very complex than what we can think of. So Mr. Eaton come up with this formula. Okay, there are a lot of calculations are there. Mr. Eaton did this, and then Mr. Miller came with this formula. But really speaking, right today, I don't like these formulas and complex mathematics. So if we make it simple, in nature, it comes like this. Better, right? So if you see hydrostatic is falling extremely close, and then I have a pore pressure, which is also a blue line, which is curvilinear in nature. Then I have a fracture gradient. It starts from the surface, but once you go down, it because of the compaction, it steepens, and same as the overburden, which is represented with the red line. It starts with the surface in a very smooth manner, but once you go down, the increment is because of the rock is compacted. It takes more stress. It can take more stress. So overburden slopes increase. Okay. Now the thing is that the question is, what will happen if I cross my pressure after overburden? Is very realistically, it is very difficult in down below in when you go more than 1 kilometer. But yes, up to 500, 400 meter, I have seen because of the pump pressure increment. If you cross the overburden pressure, the upper surface just blows out. It's just nothing like, you know, you have a straw in your mouth and you put it in the sediment or somewhere and you just blow the air through the straw, and you will see after some time the dust just blows away. So if you increase the pressure that much, crossing the overburden, you will just blow out the upper overburden sediment at any depth once you cross it. Now you see what effects actually is there due to compaction. Now whoever has studied sedimentology a little bit, they know this thing, because once the sediment is deposited, we have a lot of pore spaces, and in the pore spaces, this sediment, considering that this is deposited in water, we have a lot of pore spaces. But once the sediment height increases, then it gets compacted because of the overburden pressure. It gets compacted. So when it gets compacted, you will see that the orientation of the grains, it becomes like this from left to right because of the overburden pressure. It's sometimes flattened, but the first thing happens is the dewatering, because all the pore space is now under pressure, so water escapes from the places. So you will see in sedimentary geology lot of features which indicates the dewatering and compaction thing. Now if you see in the left side, the upper part, the logs are divided into three parts. What will happen if some place is not pure well compacted, or the dewatering process has happened very well? So if you see the upper part, if all the pores are all the sediments got dewatered properly and my compaction is good, you will see the pressure increment of the hydrostatic will be like this up to the top of the overpressure zone. But if the middle part, suppose this is a clay sediment and the pores are not connected, permeability is poor, what will happen is it will trap the water, and once it traps the water, it will be increasing the pressure more than hydrostatic. And this is the reason, if you see sometimes quicksand, all this under compacted sand, these are the reasons of that one. So once you don't deplete the water properly, or you continue to load it over, you will see the pressure hydrostatic increases, and then in the lower part again it normal pressure, it follows the normal pressure, because the lower part of this sediment is with good compaction. So this curve, the deviation is basically dangerous in the drilling part. Once you have this kind of overpressure, then you have to be very careful about this thing, because you don't know the volume of this, extension of this, and the connectivity of this. If you hit some kind of overpressure zone while drilling, suddenly you will get a kick. Kick means your mud or whatever the hydrostatic fluid I am giving through the inside the well to control the pressure will be less than the actual formation fluid pressure. So your well will be flooded with the formation fluid will start coming inside the well bore, and then it will blow out your well. And if same thing happens with like a gas or oil is there with a high pressure, then you will see once it comes in the surface, you can have some fire, and then all the accidents like fire oil accidents like that. But even this is, I called it is a overpressure gradient or overpressure zone. But even if it is not overpressure, even if it is a normal pressure, and you still have the hydrostatic loss in your well bore, then also the formation fluid will come inside, and it can come in the surface, and then the same thing can cause blowout. Now this is the little bit of sedimentological thing, why the abnormal pressure happens. One is the syn depositional type 1 and the post depositional type 2. These are all there in your book, whoever is studying sedimentology. So I am not going to do that, but just to name it, primary mechanism is under compaction, drill is disequilibrium compaction or lateral force, compressional force, tectonic setting, and everything is responsible for this. Then the secondary mechanism is fluid expansion mechanism, clay diagenesis, chemical compaction, osmosis, tectonics, centroid issue, and the hydrocarbon buoyancy. So these are the reasons why we'll have a post-depositional overpressure zone. Now let's come back to the actual phase of drilling. What is called well bore? The definition of well bore is basically a cylindrical hollow space from surface to down. Nothing simpler than this. If you see, like you want to make a hole in the surface, you are putting a bamboo, no? Durga Puja is coming and the celebration, you make a hole and then put the bamboo or the rod to do that. In a bigger scale is how the oil wells are drilled. Initially, this place was filled up with in situ rocks, right? And now you want to replace that in situ rock, take out the replacement, that in situ rock, and now is filled up by air in the surface. If you go below the groundwater table, then it will be partially filled up by air and then water. And then while drilling, we fill up this with mud. Mud is nothing but an chemical. It is not that mud we generally know. It is very highly engineered chemical. But as we know, in physics we have learned that a solid state or solid matters, they can exert or they can accommodate the pressure, the P, which is a compressional stress, and also they can take the shear stress. They can accommodate shear stress. But in liquid, we don't have that opportunity or luxury to exert or to feel the shear stress. Liquid can only feel a compressional stress. So now if you see, a well is drilled and then filled up with water. Initially, this was like a three-dimensional solid body which was there with experiencing different kind of compressional and shear stress. But now when you fill up this with water, there is nothing other than compressional stress. Now I have taken a cheese. I hope you know what is cheese means. Is very is similar to lithospheric pressure, component of Earth from my perspective, and it has some kind of softness. So this is a cheese cube, and I want to press a hollow pipe, something like this, on the top of this. This is my well. This is my drilling well. Now once I do that, if I see from the top on the map view, you will see a hole like this, right? And the part which is taken out with this the cheese part which is taken out will be a circle. Now the boss is coming. The boss is what? The overburden pressure. He is the boss with ultimate authority, but he is controlling everything. But in nature, in the surface, this is fine. But when you go down, you will see this sigma has two assistants, which is sigma 1 and sigma 2. Sigma 1 is always the biggest one, sigma 3 is the minimum one, and the sigma 2 is the intermediate one. It could be anything between sigma 2 could be anything between sigma 1 and sigma 2. Okay, sigma 3. So once the sigma is the boss and two other are null, 0, because in three-dimensional stress, sigma 2 and sigma 3 are equal, which is acting horizontally, and sigma 1 is vertical. The shape of this hollow circle will not be changed. But if I do something like this, I press that cheese cube, and then I put the same hollow pipe on the top of the cheese and press it and take out. Initially with the red arrow, if you see the red arrow, these are the pressure, constant pressure is exerting on two sides of the cheese cube. Now when you take it out, this will be a circle, fine. But with time, what will happen? The circle will not be a circle anymore. That will be like a oval shaped thing. Now you see, I want to make a hole with a circle one, very beautiful, but the nature, because of the stress, it is not allowing me to keep that open hollow space as a circle. So this is when the story is getting much more complex. In this place, you will see the sigma 1 is not equal to sigma 2 or not equal to sigma 3. So they are not in control. And now the definition of these three bosses. One is SV, which is basically the shear stress, vertical stress, not shear, vertical stress. SH max is basically, I told you that two horizontal stresses, one is maximum, one is minimum. So they are represented by these three nomenclature: SV, HH, S shear horizontal, and shear minimum. In nature, if you see in the surface, generally SV, the lithostatic pressure or overburden pressure, whatever you call, is vertical. But once we go down, that becomes now adjusted with the tectonics. So in earth surface, it is free surface. So close to surface, one principal axis stress axis is vertical and other two are horizontal. Very good. At greater depth in complex geological setup, because of the tectonics, because one continent is hitting other one, the principal stresses are not vertical or horizontal. It might be again in a different angle. So vertical stress is frequently the largest principal stress, but not always. So you will see in the next slides or next few slides that my SV, which is the overburden pressure, is not always the maximum. Sometimes the horizontal pressure might be more than the overburden pressure. Now you see what happens in nature. My slides is visible.
Yes, sir. Anderson fault.
Yes, Anderson fault classification system. In case of a normal fault, because in normal fault, one hanging block is going down, which is represented in the left corner. So once your hanging block is going down, you see my vertical stress is SV is vertical. So this is giving a pressure, and because of that fracture, I told you it cannot take after a certain amount it gets fractured. So this block hanging wall is coming down. So in this situation, you will see SV is vertical, then H max is there and H minimum is there. So these are the three orientation of H max, H minimum and SV. If I come to strike slip fault, if you see strike slip fault, again my SV is vertical, but my horizontal max is so much that it is more than SV. And of course, horizontal minimum is the least one. So H max is so much that it is moving past the rock, whole block of rock, one each past each other. So if you see the calculation here, H max is maximum here, SV is intermediate, and H minimum, S minimum is the other one. Lateral force is so much that it overcomes the SV, the vertical force. So one rock is going above other. So in this case, H max is more than H minimum, and the minimum least one is SV. So that is the reason you have that one block is coming out of another block, and this is a summary of that one. So now we understood what is the three-dimensional pressure is working below. Only this is the stress one. And now we know hydrostatic, we know pore pressure, we know fracture gradient, and you know overburden. So right now we have four parameters within us. Then again, I am coming back to this same plot where I have the hydrostatic, fracture gradient, overburden, etc. Now this one, which one I need to be to drill a safe well? You see, this is pressure is less than water gradient. This is what I was telling about. This is the depleted reservoir. Initially, all the pores below the water table will be following the hydrostatic pressure. But if I take out some fluid, the pressure will drop. So that will go into my blue zone. Then I have the overburden pressure. Overburden pressure is, again I told that something is more than fracture gradient, and once I increase the pressure that much, it will blow out all the upper sediment or litho layers. Then I have the yellow zone, which is called this is just below the fracture gradient. So this pressure basically is very close to fracture gradient, and any mistake of my calculation and anything goes wrong out of control, that will touch my fracture gradient. So I have to be within the my left boundary, or the minimum boundary of drilling a well is basically hydrostatic, and maximum one is little bit less than the fracture gradient. So the green zone is basically your play area, where you have to be very sure about your mud weight control. Again, this one pressure management. That's what I told just now. I don't want to repeat again. Now I'll go to for next one. When you are drilling a well, the major three things are there. One is the hardware part, where I need the pipes, other thing, metals, everything. Then we have to have some chemical part, which is called mud, cement, completion fluid, and production one. Production, basically that oil, that fluid is coming from the formation. And the process is drilling, cementing, and perforation. So first I need to go to the reservoir. Suppose the reservoir is at 2 kilometer depth. So I have to make a hole from surface to that particular level, and then I have to secure that everything does not collapse. So I use some metal structure, metal pipe, not just to prevent collapse the wellbore. And then the cementing is a part of that security, that there is no leakage, there is no cross flow. Cross flow means if I have two reservoirs, then this has to be isolated, because if I have two different pressures in two different reservoirs, if I connect them, they will normalize itself, right? The oil or fluid or water will not come to the surface. That from one high pressure zone, the liquid will go to the low pressure zone. So in the surface we will not have anything. So now I will show you some pictures and the some types of things. What is drill bit, what is drill pipe, casing, BOP, tubing, and what is the reason why use that. Then I'll come to chemical components, which is mud, cement, and what do they work, and then the process. So all those three will be going parallel to each other. So now I'll show you some hardware. This is beautiful design. This is a rock called bit. Generally, the bit is of two types. One is the tricone bit. If you see, there are three cones. It has put in one angle, and then if one rotates, the other two also rotates, because they are all linked, interlinked. This is called tricone bit, and you see how beautifully they are. And the other one is basically your PDC bit. It is polycrystalline diamond compact bit. And mostly, if you see these dents, that teeth, these are made up of polycrystalline diamond, and this is how they design, and that depends on the lot of things. But anyway, not today's discussion. But for your information, these are the things. This is called bit, and these are used for our drilling. So we put a pipe behind this, and then we rotate, and this is how we drill the well. This is called pipe. Now we'll come to drill pipe. There are two kinds of drill pipes again. One is called heavyweight drill pipe, and another one is the normal 5-inch drill pipe. If heavyweight drill pipe, if I just to share what is the dimension of it, one of this kind of drill pipes is basically 9 meter long, and the OD is 12 inch, 12.5 inch, more or less, 12 to 12.5 inch, and ID is 3 inch only. The whole this from 3 inch to 12.5, the whole thing is made up of metal. 4 kilometer or 20 kilometer in size, and you are drilling this thing, or you are touching that high pressurized liquid with a needle is like 4, 5 inch, 8 inch. I'm sorry, some noise is coming. So it's basically you are touching a balloon full of high pressurized fluid with a needle, and this BOP, blowout preventer, that protects you from the blowout. It holds the pressure on top of the surface so that the whole thing does not come out. Okay, can you hear me? Shatovisha?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, yes, sir. Fine. Now, end of the well, this is another hardware, is called tubing. End of the well, we put everything for the taking out. The tubing actually starts from the surface, and it goes to the reservoir level directly after putting all the casings, and the oil, after we perforate, the oil comes out through the tubing to the surface. So we have two components of things. One is the part of the casing. After the casing is done, casing is required to drill ahead in safe manner. and the tubing comes out from the bottom of the reservoir to the surface just to carry the liquid. This is there are again two kinds of tubing. One is the pipe type. It is similar as the drill pipe, but in that smaller diameter. And another one is the coil tubing. So this is basically, people have seen when you put water well, the similar thing in a bigger scale. Now, what is mud? The mud is basically a highly engineered liquid with the following properties. So mud, we have a very different kind of muds. Basically is a liquid based. Liquid is used water based mud, which is like very cheap and easy to handle, but it can also detect early the signals of blowout. But oil based mud is also there, where it is costly, but it is easy to drill with this mud, and tough to handle, because everything will be, and this oil is basically vegetable oil or petrol or diesel, whatever. Now the use of mud is a lot in our oil industry. First of one, the mud goes through the pipe. The pipe we have seen is a hollow pipe, and in the bottom of the pipe we have the bit, and bit is having some holes which is called nozzles. So the mud is pumped through the center, through the pipe. It comes out from the nozzles of the bit, and when the bit rotates, it casts the formation which is called cuttings, and from the annular space these cuttings come out to the surface. And mud's first property is to cool down the bit, because when you rub the diamond on rock, it generates a lot of heat. So that mud cools down everything, then it carries all the cuttings, and if you don't carry that thing, what will happen? You will block that one and you may lose your string. So mud is the most important thing in oil drilling. Then I have the cement. The cement is, once we drill the well, I will come to next slide, few slides, where you will see exactly how cementing is done. So once we drill the well, then I need to secure that part. So I put the casing inside the well, but still there is a right. So now I need to secure that one. So from the casing, again after putting the casing, what we do is basically we pump cement from the bottom, and the cement comes through the annular space and to the surface, and this is how we secure, and then we wait for some time, and then it is secured. So cement and casing is basically giving me the support of the wellbore to not to collapse. And then I will come to next slide how the cement the casing depth is designed. This is completion fluid. Again, this is end of the well. Once the drilling is over, we put the tubing, and then we change the mud from mud to brine. Brine is basically saline water, depends on the reservoir pressure. Different kinds of brines are there. We change it over to brine, that is called completion fluid. Now the thing is interesting part, drilling comes. What is drilling is basically, I told, is making a hole from surface down below. Diameter of the hole might change from it varies from 5 inch to 40 inch, and then is basically 12 centimeter to 1 meter in diameter. And how far we can go in one section. This is the way how the casing is designed. So this is the symbol of the casing in the well. And this looks like a penguin, penguin's feet. If I come back to the pressure point or pressure profile, you will remember that hydrostatic, pore pressure, fracture gradient, and over gradient. Now casing has a very direct relationship with this graph or with these plots. If you see in the surface, the overburden pressure and fracture gradient are very close, and pore pressure is little bit other side. What happens in the surface is the first 300 to 400 meter, they just hammer the pipe, the casing, to some level. Can you see this? Sautavisha, the blue came?
Yes, sir, can be seen.
Okay. So this is after the first part of the casing is hammered inside the well, inside the surface, and then it is representing at this in this plot of that height. So first one is no drilling, sometimes drilling or mostly it is hammered. This is called percussion drilling or hammering of casing. Or this is at the surface. The size is almost 26 to 30 inch in diameter. The biggest diameter casing is at the surface, and we can go up to 300 or 400 meter just to secure and overcome the loose soil. Then I have finished this one first phase, and now I have rock down below that casing. So after casing, what I have to do, I have to secure that casing. How? I told you, it is cementing. So I have to fill up the cement between the casing, outer side of the casing, and the annular on the rock. So the annular space. So now this is the place I have secured. So nothing will collapse in my wellbore. Whatever is down below is below the casing. Now if you see the green line in the curve, I have overcome up to that much. Right. Now if you see the mud weight, that controls my pressure, right? If mud weight is less, my hydrostatic head is less, I can control less pressure. If the pressure is more in reservoir, I have to increase my mud weight to balance that pressure. So that mud actually exert pressure, and again you come back to that one, that mud pressure will be rho gh, the density of mud, the gravitational force, and the height of the column. So now after doing this first casing, I have secured the well, I have cemented the same, and now I am increasing the mud pressure. I can go increase the mud pressure up to this one, right? The next green, horizontal green one. Because after that, I cannot increase my mud pressure because it will touch the fracture gradient. And we know if I touch the fracture gradient, I will develop cracks in my formation and I lose mud also. And I will be having uncontrolled situation. So this is the length of the green line will show me how much we can drill down below. That is my maximum limit of this section. Now you see the vertical line with the drilling bit and the mud system came. So next one, I can drill up to the point where I am not going to touch the pore pressure below pore pressure. So I told you once if I cross the pore pressure curve, which is represented here, the blue one, curvilinear curve. So I cannot go below of that one. So my upper limit is the fracture gradient and my bottom limit is my pore pressure. So again, what I have to do, I will withdraw or take out my drill string and then I will put casing, right? So first one was, you see, size was 26 or 20 inch. Then the second one, I was drilling a 17.5 inch hole. So otherwise the bit will not go inside. So if the diameter is 20 inch, so I have to, if I go down below through this pipe, I have to take a smaller hole or smaller bit. So this bit diameter is now 17.5 inch, and I drilled this well up to the level where I am touching the pore pressure. Then again, I have cemented the same thing. I put the casing inside, which is 3 by 18 size in diameter, and then I have cemented the thing. So far up to this point of casing shoe of 33.8, my well is secured. Nothing will collapse from the surface sidewise. Then again in the next section, how much I can go? You see, next one, again I increase my mud pressure, and then I can go up to the point where I am going to touch the fracture gradient. So I'll just go up to the fracture gradient, and again I will go vertically down. How far? Unless I touch the pore pressure. So this is the way, this is called one section. First is 26 inch hole or 20 inch casing shoe. Then I have 17.5 inch hole. Now I am drilling 12 inch hole. Again, I will be having another casing which is 958 inch diameter. Again, I will seal that one, and you see Next one, again I can increase my mud pressure up to the yellow line. So again I will go down below like this. So this time it will be 8.5 inch hole. So as we go down, our diameter of the hole will narrow down and will go from the surface casing, then the intermediate casing. So this is like a telescope. We are going down below actually. We are going down below and decreasing the size of that one. So in nature, if you, I mean, this is the whole range of casing size and your drill size. The first one is the bit size, 36 inch hole, and the casing size is 30 inch. Then second one is within that 30 inch casing, I can take 26 inch bit, and then my casing size will be little smaller, which is 8.5. Then again, through the 18.5 inch casing, I can take 16 inch bit, and for the 16 inch bit size hole, I will go with 13/3/8 casing. Again, similar way, after 13/3/8 casing is done or cementage is done, I'll go with 12/4 inch hole, and then for that I have 9/5/8 casing. Then again through 9/5/8 I'll go with 8.5 inch, and then we'll go to 7 inch liner. The last casing is called liner. When this is again in this picture, this 7 inch casing, because I have another more. So now in this depth, if you see, I have gone down below, secured my well, and probably this is the place where last casing is there. To save money, I don't bring it to the surface. I can hang it from my other casing from inside. So that is called liner hanger. This part is called liner hanger. And the last casing is called production casing, because I have reached reservoir now. I have crossed the reservoir, and now I am ready to put my tubing. And then through tubing, I will perforate. I will connect the space between the tubing and the formation, and from this hole, the tubing from the hole, the oil will flow into the tubing, and then I will bring it to the surface. Now again, this is a perforation. This is very schematic. We have one is called TCP, which is through tubing. I told you tubing, which is coil tubing and the pipe tubing. Sometimes we can do it with the tubing also, and sometimes we can do it with the wire line. So in the right hand side, if you see that this is first one is casing gun, is wire line. The second one is also is called another type of gun, and the last one is a tubing conveyed perforation, that is called TCP. Now, just to make you more enthusiastic, I have put some of the gun types. How it works is in this picture, because once you fire the gun, it crosses the casing and cement. This gray area is cement area, this is casing. It penetrates the thing and goes into the formation in any orientation you want. And this right corner picture top is basically the gun. These are the places where you put the explosive. Explosive is we handle RDX, HMX, and the explosive used for the thing is deadly explosive is RDX, and we put those things here in this chamber, and then when you fire from the surface, it creates a hole inside the formation. See, this one is basically a gun bullet, and the cross section of the bullet is like this, and this is the shape charge, and here is the detonator is the black, and primer is here, and then when you fire, it takes this angle to the formation. First it melts the casing and then goes into the formation. Then is called production. Production is basically the facility what brings the oil from bottom to top. So just for your knowledge, this is called the Christmas tree, which is after finishing the well and the tube, we put it on the top of the thing, and they have a lot of valves and around, and then we carry this thing to our tanks or pipelines, or then it is to storage. If you see in the right one is a pump, this is called artificial jet pump. Once you have a problem with your sucking, this is called, it actually sucks the pump, is like a tube oil. Once you press the tube oil handle, it has a piston that creates the vacuum and gives you the water to come out. This right hand side is the same thing, is in a bigger scale, and this is the way how you produce. Then ultimately, once we put the pipeline, our oil industry for upstream actually is ends, and then the crude oil, and you sell for US dollars or money or gold or whatever. Now what will come is basically what is the importance of this pressure control. If we miss it in any chance, any casual approach, if it is not properly planned or executed, anything can happen. And as I told before in this topic subject, that Assam oil will be the prime thing on case studies. But what happened actually is this is under investigation right now, an official investigation is going on. So I will not be able to tell you everything about that one. But only thing was they have a, what is published is basically they had a wellhead issue. I show you the wellhead picture before. So they had some problem with the wellhead. That is what they published so far. Unless the investigation is over, I cannot share you anything. And once it is over, you can ask me, or you can see this in paper also, or newspaper, whatever the way comes out with the investigation report. So now I am going to show you some pictures that shows how deadly this could be. So this is the well. This one left side is in Middle East. Two of them are in Middle East. This is land rig, and this is the way it just see the busted. This is a BOP. The top of BOP there is a pipe called SPP that busted, and the right one is another well which got fire. And if you see the length of this height, this one is one drill pipe. If you see my cursor, this is one drill pipe is 9 meter high. So from 9 meter, 9 meter and 9 meter, this is 27 meter from this point to this point. And up to here is 45 meter. 45 meter means is almost a 15-story building. So from this point to this point is a 15-story building on fire, and it appears immediately and suddenly. So this is how the disaster comes. People generally don't survive after this. Once this kind of thing happens, no one is there to tell the story what happens. This is left side is another offshore incident, and the right side one is the famous Piper Alpha incident in Gulf of Mexico. So these are the things. And the last picture, two pictures is of Assam. This is what happened in Assam, in the Bagjan village. The fire started. We have lost 2 firefighters, dedicated firefighters. This one, and lot of animals and all are dead. 1,500 houses are on dust now, on ashes now. And this the last picture is basically this is how the second day blowout picture is this one. How the force, if you see in the left yellow side, how forcefully the gas is coming out and it got set fire because of the friction of the pipe and the gas force was the gas velocity. The pipe got heated up and this got spark, and then first 2 weeks actually it was flowing only pipe or blowing out only gas only. Then after 2 weeks this everything got heated up and then got fire. Now if you see the nature of mother nature is how dangerous and how powerful. Sometimes we should be not making them angry. We should respect the power of Mother Earth while drilling. And if you can, some of you can see some face here. You see, these are the eyes of that smoke and this mouth kind of thing. So basically, we have to be very careful to control, to take care, to when we drill, take care of the pressures and everything. So this is the last slide. And thank you for joining this. I'm sure a lot of questions will be there because this is a very tough and mathematics and physics based subject. I try to make everything very gentle and very simple manner. But anyway, if you want to know something more, This is my number, and I have the LinkedIn profile and also my personal mail ID and personal contact number. You can, if you have any question, you can write to me directly. I will take, I will reply you in time. Might be taking a little bit more time. And also you can fill up your form, and then you can send your queries to our team. And thank you for listening and keeping all the mic mute and video mute. So that's all. Thank you. Have a great day. I stop it here.